When I take ivy off a tree, I start out with loppers and I try to go above my head so that when I look through the woods later on in the area, I can see where I've worked already. I'll start out with a really small material, just get it out of the way so I can see the thicker material that's underneath, and alternate between using the loppers and a small weeding tool that I find is good for getting underneath the ivy and pulling it loose. If it's able to break easily by hand, I'll break it. Sometimes I can bend it like 90 degrees and it'll snap, but if it's not giving way, then I'll go back to using the loppers. The ivy down at the base of the tree is often easy to grab at, and it sort of breaks at an angle off of the tree towards the ground, and you can reach underneath it and get a little bit more leverage on it. And then I'll also use the loppers with these extended arms. These go to about 39 inches, so I don't have to lean over too much. And I'll cut away from the base of the tree, and then I'll also sometimes kick it out from away from the tree and then cut it in clusters. And again, working back and forth between the loppers and this hand weeding tool to get out underneath the ivy. Back and forth between the weeding tool, the loppers. Speeding this up here just to spare people watching the full length of time. But pretty much the same technique all the way around the tree. I get the thinnest material off and pull it away from the base of the tree. Ideally, I've heard people suggest clearing a 6-foot radius around the tree. So far, I've mostly worked on just getting it away from the tree and off the tree so that the tree can survive, and then I'll find some other ways to get it off of the ground later. One thing I've recently experimented with is mounting a handsaw, folding handsaw, on a long piece of wood that's got rounded handles so that I can reach out and cut away at the ivy, because it's a little tedious to use the loppers. They only open so far for trying to cut through this ivy that's on the ground. Here's another tree, this one with quite a bit of ivy. Oftentimes it's about a 1/4 inch thick. If it's thicker than I can get with a lopper easily, I will use a handsaw and cut through it, and you'll see that a little later in this video. So I work back and forth between clearing it from the ground, cutting it, and then using the hand weeding tool to pry underneath the bark or underneath the ivy. I try not to disturb the bark if something's really attached quite strongly, then I'll just try to separate the length of the ivy somewhere along the length of the tree so that it's no longer getting a supply of water and nutrients up the tree. And sometimes I'll have to leave the thicker ivy on the tree so that I don't disturb the bark. Sometimes I'll pull away at it like this and just get it a little bit off the surface so that I can get my lopper around the whole length of it, and then work my way through peeling it off. When it's further down towards the ground, I'll have to step on it to get it out of the way, and then I can cut it towards the base of the tree. You'll notice on some of these, I'm able to bend it up towards the top of the tree and just break it. It's not very strong in some cases, and I can not have to grab the lopper. I can just bend it and crack it and then toss it off to the side. For the thicker ivy, I use a handsaw that I carry in a sheath that I wear on my belt. And I find that it's just a lot easier to cut maybe a section that's 4 or 5 inches long, trying as hard as I can to not damage the bark. And then I'll knock out a section. If it's really strongly attached to the tree, then I might just do, a couple of breaks in the length of the ivy just to cut off the nutrients from going further up the tree. This ivy is probably about 2 inches thick. I've seen some as much as 6 inches thick, and there's so much weight on it when you cut it. You can hear it crack, and the weight from up above sort of fills in the gap. So you have to cut a couple of times, otherwise your saw gets bound up in the ivy. Again, working the weeding tool. This one I have has a kind of a strange angle in it that helps get up against the tree and then get some leverage. It's not a straight line. You can see maybe in a couple of shots here where it's almost got like a 90-degree bend in the middle of it and then straightens out again, so I can get some leverage and not have to use the pointy part to wedge into the bark of the tree. You can see that I grabbed that one and then decided that it was a little too thick to try and to break by hand. I'll just use the power of the tool like the lopper. Usually do the lopper up to maybe an inch in diameter if I can cut through the ivy easily. Anything larger, then I end up using the handsaw just to spare myself and spare the lopper blade from getting worn. Again, you see I've got the weeding tool wedged underneath a thicker piece just to get it up and off the bark so I can get the lopper in there and make the cut. And you'll see this is a alder. At first, people were telling me not to bother with taking the ivy off of some of these trees that are more vulnerable and tend to fall fairly early in their lives compared to Doug firs and western red cedar. But any of these that get ivy growing really thick and going up into the tree end up having quite a bit of flowering upper parts that the birds eat and then they spread everywhere else. So it's a best practice to just make sure, nothing's getting mature in terms of the ivy going up the tree because even if the tree's, a snag or looking like it's at the end of its life, if you can keep that ivy from going further up the tree, then you end up not having um, food for the birds to spread. It's just going to spread ivy further and further afield.